We've got so many people on the call today. If you have any questions, please add them to the chat room. I've got our fantastic Olivia, who of course has been so pivotal in putting this together. Olivia will be putting together the questions and sending them. So if you have any, please do share them. There'll be an opportunity for Q&A, an extended Q&A at the end today, because I know how many people have already said to me, I've got so many questions for Andrew. Sam, AES is about healthy, wealthy and wise. So the next piece is around, and I love when I said to you, you're going to get to introduce this, and I could see you rubbing your hands together thinking, great, an opportunity for a quote, which loves a quote. So enough money, to lead Andrew into this concept of enough money.
So my quote for this, I love the Stoic philosophy, enough is never enough for the man for whom enough is too little. And so the fundamental question in our planning business is how much is enough, and where we begin with the actual, after the why, what's important, what are the values, but how much is enough, and how do people answer, because fundamentally that goes to am I okay, and that nagging anxiety rich people can feel. And so I love that the Stoics believe nothing can ever be enough for the man for whom enough is too little. What are your thoughts on this area? How much is enough, Andrew?
It so reminds me of that legendary story where Kurt Vonnegut and Joseph Heller are at a big party hosted by a hedge fund manager, and Kurt Vonnegut walks up to Joseph Heller and he says, "Do you realize that this hedge fund manager made more money last year than your entire earnings from your book Catch 22?" At which point Joseph Heller looked at Kurt Vonnegut and said, "Yeah, but I have something that this hedge fund manager will never, ever have." Vonnegut goes, "Well, what's that?" And he says, "I have enough." So it's perfect, isn't it? It's a funny thing, because I think as humans, when we push a bar and we realize we want us to reach a specific goal, we end up shoving that bar further and further up. So we never really, often don't really attain that true level of satisfaction. We might say, well, I'd be really satisfied if I end up with net worth of $2 million. And then when people get to that $2 million, all they can see is the people who have 3 million or the people who have 4 million. And so they're not there yet. They continue to push that bar further. And I think we all know people like that. And I think it's in every single one of us. It's not just people like that. It's all of us. And so there's that moment where we have to sit, we have to reflect, and then we have to ask ourselves, how much money do we really need? And so if the goal here is life satisfaction, how much do we need to maximize life satisfaction? And is more necessarily better? So you can take a study like the Easterlin paradox, which Richard Easterlin did in the 1970s. And it surprised a lot of people because it showed that, okay, yeah, increases in income did correlate with increases of general life satisfaction, general happiness. Call it general life satisfaction because happiness goes up and down day to day. But general life satisfaction improved when we had more income up to a certain point. So Daniel Kahneman, the economist, ended up sort of grabbing that baton, and he looked at did another study and found, yeah, very similar figures indexed to inflation. So the similar figure in the United States is somewhere around $105,000 a year. And here's one of the reasons. In the US nationally, $105,000 a year is, and I say nationally, it's generally enough for you to be able to afford decent food, decent shelter, have a little bit of time for the odd holiday. But beyond that point, there wasn't a lot of added level of contentment. So a recent study that was done, a Purdue-based study, actually found that income and life satisfaction at a certain threshold is inversely proportional. So we can actually drive ourselves to hit a certain income level. But beyond that point, we end up often with less satisfaction. And so in the United States, they found that this level was about $160,000 a year. Now, they did this with a variety of different countries, and that tipping point was different for every country because it was really relative to how much it costs to live in that given country. If it was a more expensive country than the United States, that tipping point was a little bit higher before life satisfaction turned slightly downward. If it was a place where, like Thailand, where there was a lower cost of living, then that income threshold point was actually lower. So the fascinating thing really was that by and large, the people that earn more money, say more than 160,000 in the US, were less satisfied than the people who earned $110,000 a year. But the element here that when you're looking at, and I think we have to be really careful when we're looking at national statistics like this, because there's another component to all of this. And it's that, first of all, on a national level, if you are taking, let's say, $105,000 as a relative satiation point for income in the United States, that's just a little bit more. Let's say it's about 50% more than the median household income in the US. So it just gives you generally a little bit more than your neighbors. But if you end up living in a place where it's really expensive, like Portola Valley or in San Francisco, near San Francisco, where house prices, median home prices are $4.5–5 million. So those are the median home prices. And you're earning $105,000 a year, you're going to have troubles actually putting yourself under shelter. I mean, you're going to have a hard time paying rent or paying the mortgage. So when you dig deep into income and happiness as it relates to health and income, there's a point where it's very much relative to who and what is actually going on around you, the relative cost of living. And ironically, who has more, or people, if you surround yourself with people who have a lot more, or you perceive that they have a lot more, odds are that this can affect your health. So a fascinating study in the UK looked at income as it related to health and found that it was entirely relative to your neighborhood. So if you lived in a neighborhood where the people around you earned a lot more than you did, you could earn a lot, but your life satisfaction would suffer because we compare to the Joneses. It's just something that we do. And ironically, your health would also suffer. So that connection between money and happiness, or life satisfaction and health, so that sort of triage, if you will, is very complex indeed.
Yeah, so it's an interesting one.
I love that, but we because we look at, you had so many great words in there, like satisfaction, happiness, contentment, and we look at the enough is the ability to underwrite a life that is meaningful to you as an individual. So that basically means that anyone can access. As soon as you get into purpose, I know we're coming on to that, as long as you have a clear sense of meaning, the ability to underwrite a life that is meaning to you, it means that it's easily attainable to anyone. Whilst Andrew and I often look at super rich people, and enough can never be enough for them. It's just always, there's always further. You can never reach it. But anyone, if they can define their purpose, their meaning, what's important to them, and they have that ability to underwrite that life that's important to them, then it is, of course, attainable. It just flips it. So that's why I love those types of thoughts which Andrew brings on contentment, happiness, and enough.
Yeah, and I think that piece, and I know we're going to jump into it later, and I'm going to throw back to Andrew around some of his financial principles, because I know that there are people that are interested in this on that call. But when we use the word purpose in English, it means, there's an intent behind it. Why did you do it? I did it on purpose. It was intentional. And when we start living the intentional life, then there's and so it's such an important piece, say, in our accountability documents, where that purpose piece sits at the top, so the rest of it just makes sense. why did you do it? I did it on purpose. And I think that's really important. Are there any, and you know, there are so many people, you know, the number of people that have sent me photos of them with your book since Millionaire Expat, since we announced we were doing this call, and it's great that we're contrarian at To Be Limitless. We love to flip things, but are there some principles in enough money that you think are really important, Andrew?
I just think obviously there's an element when we're looking, we'll bring it back to life satisfaction, Mick, and having enough money. Obviously, the more you have, it's not necessarily going to improve your life satisfaction, but things like debts and not having enough can actually drag on you and actually make you depressed. So things like debts, for example. So studies really show that if you're carrying a lot of debt, there can be a high level of stress associated with that, depression associated with that, reduction in life satisfaction associated with that. So the idea, I think, ideally, if someone can have their own shelter paid for when they retire, just to have a place that they can call their own, the bank can't take away from them. So they may have some kind of income when they retire, they may not, but just knowing that the place that they live is theirs. They own it. And I know a lot of people will say, wait, no, you can leverage the equity and you can end up with more money. You know, I knew a guy who did that. And when the business went sideways, somebody came and actually took his house away from him. And he died a couple of years ago, but every time I speak to his wife, he says to me, Andrew, you talk to people about money. And we had a lot of money at one point, but she said to me, if you can just try to get it through to people, that it's not necessarily about maximizing future gains when you have enough. It's about the simple things. And so she said, we regret not having paid for our home, not having that place that we could live in and know that we owned it. No one could ever take that away from us. So I think that's just one simple important factor there, Mick.
Yeah, and we talk about it a lot. We see the crushing impact of credit card debt and all of those different types of debt. So I think that's a really key insight for people around the reduction of debt and having a shelter that you can call your own, and really simple, and not easy, but really simple principles to go into.